Hello. In today's lecture, we're going to be taking a look at what's called the cost transfer function within X3. Now, the cost transfer can be a useful tool in helping to maintain costs, your standard and other analytical costs across your various warehouses. So we're going to take a look at a couple different ways in which this cost transfer may be utilized in the system. So to start, what we're going to do is we're going to come under our costing menu. Then we're going to come down under miscellaneous processes, then here to cost transfer. Okay, so let's take a look at this function here. So first thing to note is when we're transferring costs, there's different bases upon which we can do it. One, we could set this setting here to unique, then specify a particular product for which we want to perform a cost transfer. Another way in which we can run this function would be by setting this all flag, which would serve to transfer all costs from one warehouse or one fiscal year to another. Then we also have this selection option. And this selection option can be used in cases where you come in here and set up an advanced filter. So for instance, maybe you wanted to perform a cost transfer just on products of a particular category. Through your object selection here, you could go ahead and set up your product category in here and say, I want to perform cost transfers just for products that have a category set to bulk, for instance. Okay. So for this exercise, we're going to use the unique option. Okay. So we'll go ahead and set this to my Fin 301 product. Now, down here in this coefficient field, now the way that this coefficient can be utilized is, let's say for instance, we're doing a cost transfer whereby we want to move our standard cost from our current fiscal year to our next fiscal year. Okay, so and we know that with this movement of the standards that we want to express a percentage markup on the standard cost to reflect the fact that material costs are going to be higher, labor costs are going to be higher, overheads are going to be higher. So you could come in and utilize this coefficient here and say if I wanted to mark up my standard cost by say 5%, I could go ahead and set a 1.05 in there. And when I perform the cost transfer, that would serve to mark up the cost by 5%. Okay. Next down here, we have our source section and our destination section. Okay. So let's take a look at some different options that we have here. Now, one way in which we can use the cost transfer is to transfer costs between warehouses. Okay, so you know from some of our prior lessons that in X3 we keep a standard cost at each warehousing facility. So some organizations, they'll go through the exercise of analyzing and establishing a standard at their manufacturing facility. Then they'll just go ahead and use this cost transfer to move those standards from the primary warehouse to all their different warehouses or 3PLs. So for instance, I could come in here and say, take the standard cost that's established for this product that's established at my NA021 warehouse and go ahead and move that over and copy that over and make that the standard cost at my NA022 warehouse. Okay, so I could come down here, go ahead and click on the OK button, and I get a little log file telling me that the cost has been moved. So now, if I was to come and look at the standard costs, up here under my common data, products, product cost, and standard costs, go ahead and pull up my FIN 301 product. This is for my fiscal year 5. Okay, so now you can see that here's my standard cost at my NAO 21. Then here is my standard cost at my NAO 22 site. Okay, so it basically copied that over. Now keep in mind I had that coefficient set to 5%, so that's why you're seeing a little bit of a markup in the costs on this new warehousing facility. Okay, so let's go back. Now another application, as I was mentioning, is when you do the cost transfer, you can move the cost across, warehousing sites. Another application that you could have is when you do the cost transfer, you could say take my standard costs for my current fiscal year and go ahead and move those into my standard cost for my new fiscal year. Okay, so here I took my standard cost for my fiscal year 5 and I'm moving that into my fiscal year 6. Okay, so this right here, this is a common exercise that I'll see many organizations utilize. They might come in and say, okay, go ahead and do this for all of my products in my product catalog. Take my current year standard cost. There hasn't been really much great fluctuation in the market prices. My labor rates are pretty steady, my overheads are pretty steady, so go ahead and just take my current year standards and move them into my standards for my next fiscal year. Okay, so I could come in here, say okay to that, and that'll go ahead and give me my log file showing me all these new costs that have now been created for the new fiscal year. Okay. So let's take a look at one more application of the cost transfer. Okay, so with this, we took a look at transferring standard costs between sites, between years. Now another way in which we can perform a transfer is on the basis of the cost type. Okay, so a lot of our discussions up to this point in time have focused in upon the standard cost of the product. Now in X3, the standard is very important. I mean, it can serve as your basis of your inventory valuation. A lot of your provisional cost reporting in the system is predicated upon the standard cost, so it's very important. But with the standard, we also have these other cost types: revised costs, budgeted cost, and simulated costs. Okay, so these latter three cost types are basically analytical costing categories that you have within X3 that you can use for purposes of cost forecasting. You can utilize them for purposes of costing out maybe odd-sized batch sizes. So there's a variety of different applications that you could have for them. So, for instance, maybe you're going through the exercise of, developing your cost forecast for a new fiscal year, and you want to have some basis upon which to do your development. So one thing that I oftentimes see clients utilize is they say, well, as a basis, let me go ahead and take my standard for my current fiscal year, and then I'm going to go ahead and transfer that into my budgeted cost type category for my next fiscal year. Okay. And again, I could maybe utilize the coefficient again, if I want to forecast, an increase of cost based upon increases in labors and burdens and so forth, I could utilize the coefficient for that purpose. Okay, so this is going to go ahead and do a move for us. We'll come over here and click on OK, and that went ahead and moved that over. So now what we'll see, if I come back under my common data menu, back down under my products, product cost, now I'm going to come under my budgeted standard costs. There's my FIN 301 for my NAO 21 site, and there's my cost that I transferred over for my 2018 fiscal year. Okay, so that is the basics behind the cost transfer function within X3. I hope that this video lecture was of help to you. If so, I'd ask you to please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to inbox me. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.